to our face-to-face meeting, councillors, and a reminder that it's being live streamed for those who couldn't come today. It is lovely when we can be together for live stream, for face-to-face, and Councillor Wang is caught in Wellington, but Morena can't get out because of the weather, but we will continue to have these hybrid meetings, I think, for some time. So we've got to learn to face it and the technology. Just a reminder, please, to turn off your mobile phones, and a break will be taken for members to clear your messages. And we think that break, we're not always right, is around 11 o'clock. Welcome to the media and to the public gallery. Nice to have people back in the gallery. Well done. So I'm going to ask Councillor Kumar if you could open our meeting with the council prayer. Are you all right? Yeah, thank you. We should stand.
Tutawa mai ai runga, tutawa mai ai raro. Tuatawa mai ai roto, tuatawa mai ai waho. Kia tawai te mauri tu. Te mauri ora ki te katoa, haumi e hui e tai ki e.
Thank you, and we call for apologies. I have an apology for Councillor Rotorua Tate, who is attending the tangi for Dame June Jackson in Auckland this morning. Are there any other apologies? No? And Fisher, nice to have you on Zoom. Do I have a mover for the apology? Councillor Donaldson, seconded Councillor Kai Fong. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary? Carried. Right, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? There appear to be none. Urgent items not on the agenda. Are there any urgent items? Councillor Bentley and Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. With regards to what has been put back into confidential or public excluded, it's with regard to the emergency housing update. I think that every single one of our ratepayers has an interest and an opinion on this matter, and we should be holding this discussion in public.
Well, I will respond to that. All elected members have had the full confidential papers, and if you've read the confidential items, you'll fully understand why they are in confidential today, and they will be released to the public at the appropriate time. So I rule that out. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Mayor. My request was exactly the same. I read all the documents and could not find any sound reason that came within the ambit of violating personal rights or commercial confidentiality, and so thus I had the same request. Thank you.
And I ruled it out. Having looked at the sensitivity of the paper, I have ruled on that. Councillor Kumar. And I do want to add that all councillors and elected members are very interested in this issue, and we've got some weighty decisions to make this morning. Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, with the government earlier, and I don't know whether it's urgent, but the public would like to know, because we have been a destination, the council as well as the library as well, public amenities, where we have been checking for people who are vaccinated or not. As of this Saturday or following Monday, when it changes, are we going to allow all the members of the public back into the council? And
yes, and we all received the heads up last night about that decision, and that will be relayed and has been relayed to all of our council facilities. Right, we move to the confirmation of minutes. the council minutes on the 24th of February. I need a mover that the minutes of the council meeting held on the 24th of February be confirmed as a true and accurate record. Moved Councillor Kai Fong, seconded Councillor Yates. All those in favour, are there any corrections? I put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary? Carried.
One issue that arises from the minutes, if I might, it regards 5.1, council meeting on the 16 December. This is on item 5. And there's an update on the RMA committee was promised, but of course that's going to be reported to the Operations and Monitoring Committee, from which I'm banned. So could I please have the update on the council's RMA committee report be given here at the next council meeting? Thank you.
No, I rule that out of order. Councillor McPherson, it's sensitive. You haven't been banned. The door is left open for you to take the action that the full council's made, and the door is open. That is not an item for today. We had voted on those minutes. So we move on to the release of confidential items. Do I have a mover and a seconder to receive the report that the report confidential items to be released to be received? Councillor Tapsell moved, seconded Councillor Donaldson. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Carried. And that's where we release confidential items at the appropriate time. Recommendations from other committees. The report of recommendations from other committees. I need a mover and a seconder that the report recommendations from other committees be received. Thank you. Councillor Yates, seconded. Councillor Tapsell. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. Carried. We now need a mover and a seconder for the first motion that the following recommendations of the Strategy, Policy and Finance Committee held on the 10th of March be adopted. Are there any points or clarification before we move to the vote? That was about the property at Pungakawa Valley. There appear to be no questions arising, so I move to, do I have a mover? That Council approve the disposal of surplus road reserve at part of Pungakawa Valley Road, Rotorua, as shown on the attached plan to the adjacent property in exchange for land required for proposed pumping station. Do I have a mover? Oh, Councillor Wang, was that a question? Was that a question for clarification, or are you moving?
No, just a signal that I'd like to move.
Thank you. Well, I'll accept you moving. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Donaldson. And that is open for discussion before we put the vote. Is there any further discussion on this matter? There appears to be none. I put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary? Carried. Staff reports. Recommendation 1, the long-term plan 2021-23, Year 2, delivery of the adoption of a discussion document. Do I have a mover and a seconder to receive the report that the report long-term plan 2021-2023, Year 2, delivery, the adoption of a discussion document be received? Do I have a mover? Councillor Donaldson, seconded Councillor Kai Fong. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Carried. Thank you. Thomas Collet has moved to overview the report and has a PowerPoint presentation. It reminds us of what we discussed in committee. Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you, Your Worship, and good morning, councillors. Just give it a second for the presentation to come up.
just explain while Gomati is trying to get that up. We are being able to share the screen today so that Fisher will be able to also see the presentation in Zoom. So we are just experimenting a bit more again, so just bear with us. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you. So I will take us through the presentation that was used at the SPNF meeting a couple of weeks ago, and obviously the content of this presentation was also at the workshop held earlier as well. So you should all be very familiar, and I will move a little bit quicker through it this time around. So just bear your indulgence. Where we are, so 9 months ago now, we did adopt the long-term plan with regards to obviously the outcomes and the strategies that we were attempting to work towards for our community. And we are now 9 months through the first year of the LTP, and we are now looking and talking about the budgets of year 2. It is common practice that within the legislative changes that took place many years ago, that you are able to just uplift year 2 of the LTP if it is consistent with the strategies and deliverables that you're looking out to achieve, rather than doing a separate annual plan. And in this case, because of the timing of how close we have come to adopting the LTP and the fact that our strategies are still very consistent, we have elected to just uplift year 2 of the LTP. And the reason for that is it obviously supports Vision 2030, and the kaupapa we stand behind, and really is around the vision to action. And so we see no real deviation from the LTP, with the exception, obviously, there's been a couple of key changes in the world that we live in, which we'll talk about later. So at the heart of the LTP, homes and thriving communities around, in particular around housing, freeing up more land, building more housing for our community, the community safety around the CBD, but also around the safety concerns that some of our community has, economic development around creating more jobs for our people, focusing on climate change, and one of the key critical planks as well as looking after the infrastructure that we've got and the continuation of investing into that. There's some risks, though, that we face. Local government reform, RMA reform, Three Waters reform, those are all things that central government is imposing on us, and there's some uncertainty as to how and when they will continue and the impact that they'll have. We still live within the COVID-19 environment, and we're seeing the impacts of that, in particular around the supplies and logistics. One of the main impacts has also been inflation, so at the time it is tracking at 5.9%, however it is forecast to be closer to 8% for the year, and obviously that has significant impact on the resources that we acquire to do the things that we do. And what we have done is within the LTP, we haven't provided for any significant uplift of our cost base to meet that inflationary pressures, so we are therefore asking our organisation to do more with less. User pays stays at risk, in particular around the events and venue space. There's been the assumption that the world will return to a little bit of normal for that area, but without knowing whether we'll enter into a variant. I don't know what the next variant of COVID will be and the impact that may have or may not have. There are some risks associated to some external fees. And the other one, and it's something that I've talked about now at probably every O&M committee for the last 6 months, is really around our staff retention and attraction and the risks that faces with regards to an inability to retain and attract staff going forward, and therefore our ability to deliver against our priorities. So what does year 2 look like from a rates perspective? It does deliver a 5.7% increase, and the focus is on housing, water sustainability, funding to support the renewal of our infrastructure. Has some contractual inflation built in with regards to waste management and sewage delivery, but all the remaining cost base is pretty much zero. Has some staff retention items added into it, and obviously finance costs. Now, you will recall at the workshop that We did initially float a 5.5% increase, and I think the Mayor advocated quite strongly at that time in that workshop around whether that was something that was right for the community. But we also talked at that time, and I think I put yourselves under a bit of pressure to explain the risks associated with going with a lower increase that than signalled in the LTP. And I'll just quickly touch on those. So the first one being inflation. So with no inflationary increase to our cost base, with the exception of two areas, we really are asking our organisation to do more with less. In particular, there's some uncertainty around where inflation will actually end up, and this increase that is being proposed is well below the inflationary forecast. Bearing in mind that the inflationary forecast, we talk about CPI, and we have talked about in the past that our costs don't really shift by CPI, and generally our costs shift higher as a percentage than the headline inflation. So in doing this, the risk is that we really are putting the organisation under pressure to do more with less. At the same time, we're actually asking the organisation to do more. So our resource consenting has extra demands on it. We're doing some plan changes with regards to delivering against our housing initiatives, particularly where you will be talking shortly about, I think, the housing and emergency housing, and that obviously has costs attached to it. And in particular, from a sustainability perspective, we're coming under more pressure as well with regards to our resource consents, and we do have some significant resource consents coming due in the next fiscal year, particularly around some of our main water supplies. And so not only are we asking the organisation to do more with less with regards to the cost base not increasing in rate with inflation, but we're also putting our organisation under more pressure to do more. In the same time, not only that, central government is putting us under even more pressure. So the Three Waters reform draws staff out of it with regards to having to participate into those processes. And you would have seen all the other initiatives as well with regards to our participation. And so, in a way, the three major items create some significant risk with regards to us going below that 5.7. And you'll recall at that workshop around the decision, therefore, that those risks to mitigate or help to mitigate them, we did therefore need to uplift back to what the LTP had suggested. From a capital works program, it is a significantly big year, commensurate probably on par with this year, about 142 million. There is a rather large investment into the renewal of our existing assets. That's around $44 million worth of asset renewals, along with the other key items being the commencement of the wastewater treatment plant consent and upgrade, the Tarawera sewage scheme. There's also finishing the element of the Rotorua sewage scheme, completion of the lakefront, the commencement of the museum, and the commencement of the aquatic centre refurbishment as well. We have made adjustments to the program of work that was outlined in year 2 of the LTP, and obviously taken on board what hasn't been able to be achieved in this fiscal year, or whether it's been deferred or whether it crosses over. And so we have seen a number of overall projects change, but the number itself still remains at that $140 million. So just to provide a little bit more detail of what makes that up, because it is a significant investment into our community, targeting the museum, 19 million, the wastewater treatment plant, 18 million, the aquatic centre, 15 million, and then you can see there as well that the majority of that is significant investment into community amenities and infrastructure. From a debt perspective, we will be taking on a good portion of debt to support that capital works program, and you should see a straight correlation between the investment into our infrastructure and the drawdown of the debt. And what you see there is where the debt is being drawn down and the projects that obviously that debt is supporting. And in the main, it is around key infrastructure and key community amenities such as the museum and the lakefront. So where do we sit with regards to our debt? So we're still below our debt cap. We are forecast to creep closer to that in the next 3 to 4 years as our capital works program continues on. Obviously, depending on how our capital works program goes and the impacts of COVID, inflationary impacts and the ability to get contractors to do work, our debt will adjust accordingly with how our capital works program commences. So from a rating perspective, the overall 5.7 is split fairly evenly between general rates and targeted rates. However, within the targeted rates, it is predominantly skewed towards water and the water by metre, and that's just a reflection of the cost pressures, and as I said, that there's quite a bit of work required around resource consents for some water supplies, and so the rate increase therefore reflects the work that's required in those areas. And how does it fall? So again, around the strategy from Council of retaining the UAC at the levels that were originally set. So the reason for keeping the UAGC down and not putting it up, and by down I mean we're holding it, is around maintaining the progressive nature of our rating base. And as the rates fall, you'll see quite a tight banding this time. So obviously we're not impacted by housing revaluations. And because the general rate and targeted rates are spread fairly evenly, the rate increase also falls fairly evenly. So just a quick summary on the quick presentation. Overall rates increase of 5.7% as outlined in the LTP, a debt increase of 84 million and broadly in line with what we were indicating in the LTP as well, and well within our debt limits, and that is being used to support a $143 million investment into infrastructure for our community. And the key focus of the LTP remains, and that's around housing and development, safety and security, and the plan as well continue on the focus around bringing back on board a couple of key cultural community amenities, such as the Performing Arts Centre and in particular the museum, and also the aquatic centre for our community. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions while I go backwards on Una's to that point.
We'll open now for questions, and I'm sure Una will go through the process of engagement at the end. Right, are there any questions? Councillor McPherson.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. The deferrals, I appreciated the extent and nature of deferrals. That struck me as wise, given the need to ameliorate the risks. My first question, is the extent to which some of the risks have not been quantified, and there's difficulties about doing that. Some of the risks, like staff retention, you've done quite thorough and careful numbers, it seems to me, and I wondered if that risk quantification could be extended a bit more. So my question is, can more work be done on risk analysis and finding ways and means of safeguarding our position should those risks substantially deteriorate? Because some of them are really very difficult to predict, aren't they?
Correct, Councillor. So you can always do more and more risk analysis. So we believe at this time we've clearly articulated the risks that we face. I think, as you highlighted, Councillor, how they may land and fall, and as I've suggested, there is incredible uncertainty around it, and so we have to be adaptive and respond when they fall. I think the key one is A, we know what the risks are, and B, put measures in place that as they impact us greater than we anticipate, we're able to respond. But I think short of that, doing more and more risk analysis probably wouldn't warrant the extra work at this stage.
My second question concerns the possibility of needing to do organisational rationalisation in the event of, say, Three Waters functions moving to regional levels or a different level. Has any organisational rationalisation been calculated? Because it could be as high as about a third of our current functions.
Councillor McPherson, I don't want to jump in over an officer's response, but that is not relevant. It is out of scope of this year, year 2 of the long-term plan. There is no impact predicted this year, so it's out of scope.
From 3 waters.
Thomas, you might want to answer.
Look, we have to model on the world that's in front of us, and while 3 waters may have an impact to us, we have to continue on as normal. Yes, we have modelled what the impact of 3 waters would look like. It's not anywhere close to the third that you probably indicate. And from a financial viability perspective, actually the organisation might have some minor challenges, but without further discussion with central government, without knowing fully how 3 waters impacts, without understanding the transition period, without understanding transitional funding, it's really hard to quantify to you elected members as to what that impact may look like. And once we have more certainty on those, you will be the first to know.
Thank you. My third and final question through you, Chair, is concerns Westbrook. I notice there's a number there of something like $800,000 work projected for Westbrook. What's included in that?
So as we've told the councillors many times, the Westbrook development that I think you're thinking of, councillor, is obviously the wider development of that precinct that work is being done on to understand what it looks like. Westbrook itself is currently an existing sporting complex. And so the money that you see in that budget is investment into the existing infrastructure and sports field that is currently there.
Okay. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Your Worship. It was just to raise a point of clarification in respect of one of Councillor McPherson's questions. There was an excellent list of local government reforms tabled at the Zone 2 hui online the other day, and the 3 waters service entities are forecast to be in place in July to December of 2024, so they won't affect this long-term plan.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you. Thomas, given the challenges like rising costs and staff levels that you've outlined, I am too concerned about the ability of Council to deliver. So my question is, given that we're in year 2 of the long-term plan, but we haven't diverted any of the capital projects or the projects outlined, has the budget been stress tested to ensure that we can deliver on those under these new challenges? And I ask that because it would still be prudent, I believe, to look at it and reprioritise or potentially cut back on planned spending for projects that are outside of our core services.
Yep. So first of all, councillor, I'd argue that the whole capital works program is within our core services. It is based on obviously the LTP. With regards to stress testing, at the moment we're aiming to obviously achieve a significant capital works program. I think when you break that number up, a third of it is still investing into our existing infrastructure and the renewals, and we have to forge ahead with that. To ensure that our infrastructure stays at the level or improves on where we are. There's a couple of other big items such as the wastewater treatment plant, the museum and the aquatic centre that actually predominantly make up the rest of that. And in a way, when it's time to go to the market will therefore indicate as to whether we're actually able to achieve them or not, whether they can respond, whether they have the capacity and such. And that will give us a little bit of the ability to be flexible based on what the market comes back with. I did signal, I think at the last O&M, just with regards to our existing tendering, we're only now just starting to see and feel the impact of some of the risks that we've talked about the logistics. So we are seeing large companies choosing not to tender at this moment. We are seeing more companies that regularly tendered not electing to do it as well, and in particular where you're asking for fixed price, so whereby we're wanting to transfer the risk, we're seeing significant premiums coming through. And so that will be our future going forward, and the organisation will have to respond on probably a case-by-case basis depending on what that project is as to whether it wishes to A, accept the risk of not renewing that asset, or B, accept the additional premium that may have to get paid. But it's very hard at the moment, particularly when you look at the Capital Works program. I would struggle to say which one's not a priority and which one should not go ahead, and saying that you are always in a position to be able to do so if you wish.
I have Councillor Wang and then Councillor Kumar and then Councillor Kaifong at this stage. Councillor Wang.
Thank you, Worship, and for you. Thank you, Thomas, for the presentation. And yes, it really certainly outlines the constraints and the risks that we're facing now and going on into the future. My question, I'm not too sure if it would be for Thomas or possibly to Una, but it was related to the letter that the chair of the Rural Community Board, Mrs. Trumper, sent out to all elected members last night, and it was raising the issue of both the Lakes and Rural Community Boards' aspirations to be considered or included in this LTP document. And the concern, I guess, around that is around the devolved funding as well, and the fact that the devolved funding currently is strictly for the capital projects. Sorry, there's a little bit of a disconnect with the internet there. The concern is around the ability for the community boards to be able to fund the ongoing maintenance and I guess the operational costs for certain projects that they have invested in. And one of the one of screens just popped off again, technology issues. One of the examples for that would be the defibrillators that the Rural Community Board has invested in the rural communities, and that they cannot provide the ongoing funding for the maintenance and battery replacements for those defibrillators. That's just one of the examples. Yeah. But the concern around that is whether or not they would be able to be included in this and potentially even look at the funding model going ahead.
Thank you for that. We all received that email and referred it on to Mrs. Hopkins. Thomas, do you want to respond? It's quite operational, or do you?
I'll respond, as I'm not sure Mr. Collet has actually seen that email. There's a couple of things going on in that request. Most of them can be taken offline and worked through, just like any of the other requests for edits and things that we do receive from our other elected members between now and when we actually go out for engagement. So that's the first thing. The second thing is there's a number of sort of operational things that Councillor Wang has raised there, and that's something again that we can take offline. It's not really relevant to the actual conversation in front of us today, but I'll share that letter with Mr. Collet and we can go from there.
Thank you for raising it. Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Thomas. Thomas, very simply, just saying that this council LTP Year 2 delivery summary is going out for discussion document to the community for engagement. So what are we hoping to achieve with that engagement? Are we going to alter anything with the community? Gives us a feedback, strong feedback along the lines of some things that they are opposing, or if they wish to add something to this delivery document. So are we engagement for the purposes of a discussion with still firm concrete on what we are going to achieve as per the delivery, or are we going to alter if...
That I did ask when Mr. Collet came. This is about what the content of the report is that we're taking out, and Una will talk about the engagement in the next step of this, but your questions are quite relevant, but I think we'll leave it for the next step about when do we go out, how do we go out, and what do we do with the feedback. Is that what you're asking?
Okay, supplementary to that is, has any model of engagement been put out there so that we could know, or is that what Una is going to tell us as well?
Yes, you'll hear in the next slide, yeah.
Thank you.
And we did cover that off in SPNF, but it's good to repeat so that we all know our responsibility as elected members when that time comes with the community. Are there any other questions on the content? Councillor Kaifong, sorry, I did have you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thomas, so you've indicated that Year 2 takes into account inflationary costs for capital expenditure and for the staff wage costs of about 5%. But for all other inflationary costs, you expect the staff to actually find the savings for that. And so my question is really, is it going to put the organisation under significant pressure, and is it realistic to ask the staff to, make that amount of savings in OPEX when you've said that the level of inflation is probably lower than what is likely to happen? So there's real risk of underperformance in terms of being able to deliver on projects and being over budget at the end of the next financial year?
It's going to be incredibly difficult, yes. We are, as I said, asking our staff to do more with less, and with that comes significant risk. I think if you recall as well, when back in 2013-14 we went through an efficiency program. I think we pulled $5 million of costs out of budget one year and then had $1 million efficiency targets year after year for a number of years. My firm belief is at the moment that you could scratch away at some minor savings, but actually to put significant savings in to free up more money, you're actually going to have to stop doing something or turn something off. So therefore, taking our existing cost base, not inflating it in line with where inflation is heading to be, will put the organisation under immense pressure.
So just a supplementary to that, I think that sort of led into my next question, which you said you've got to either put some work aside or relook at that. So it's a question of prioritising, I think, the CapEx, where perhaps some projects could be either paused or put on hold so that we reassess the ability of the organisation to actually deliver on all the CapEx projects without having such a huge risk.
Yeah, Councillor, for me, I don't see the risk being in our CapEx. I think the risk to CapEx is actually that from a price perspective, the market has moved significantly or there's an unavailability. And I think naturally with the large program of work that we have, there will be flexibility in the next year to accommodate any of those risks that manifest. The main risk is actually in our operating budgets and our probably while we have a couple of levers that we can pull, such as what we're doing this year to pull back some of the pressures that we have, we may not have the ability to offset those risks next year without actually stopping something. And I don't know what that something would be at the moment.
So I suppose it's a bit of a balancing line between what we do this year and next year, because I think that if we're going to impact, we're only talking about this year, but we need to be careful that we're not having unintended consequences of what happens financially next year as well, given that, inflation is likely to be higher. We don't know whether we're heading into recessionary times, perhaps.
Yep.
I hear the Chief Executive.
Can I, through the Chair, can I just add to that? Councillor Kaifong, you're quite correct when you point out the fact that the organisation, as a result of this plan, will be under significant pressure, without a doubt. I think the question comes back to how do you mitigate the risk of the next 12 months? The reality is that we don't know actually what the next 12 months is going to quite bring with regards to inflation, the growing pressures on our community, and so we're operating in an environment of incredible uncertainty. There is a tendency clearly that everyone would want to increase that level of certainty and decrease the level of risk by making change now. The problem is to make change now would mean that we have to make decisions with regards to removing or slowing down the delivery of different services of this organisation to the community, and therefore reducing the the value, if you like, that the organisation delivers for the community at this particular point in time to mitigate future risk. I think what we would advocate instead was that we need to go into this next 12 months very much aware of the sort of pressures that are on the organisation. We need to continually be looking outside as to what are those issues that we can see actually emerging over the 12-month period, and therefore actively adjust some of the work that we're doing by delaying projects or looking at doing things differently as we actually continue over the 12-month period. But what clearly that requires is a level of really engagement and interaction between the council and the organisation to be discussing these matters as we move forward over that period.
That Council approve the long-term plan 2021-2031 Year 2 delivery discussion document for the purpose of community engagement.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor,
Oh,
sorry.
you were going to speak, Una.
Engagement?
Yes, sorry, Una, you were going to speak about engagement. Sorry? I thought you were waggling at me to turn my mic.
I was. I was doing that too. So thank you. So just to go over what the engagement process will look like in terms of the Year 2. I just want to emphasise first that remember you have already extensively consulted on your priorities and they were done through the long-term plan development. Long-term planning, as we've talked about many times, is long-term, and you set a plan that spans 10 years. And as Thomas talked about right at the beginning of his presentation this morning, where we are looking to deliver within that envelope of the up-and-coming year, the legislation does say that actually you don't need to go out and consult. However, in saying that, there is a really good opportunity here to be going out to the community to show that you are sticking with the direction as set in your long-term plan and to emphasise those commitments that you have made to delivery and highlighting those priority issues as set in your long-term plan. And that's what this engagement period is setting out to do. It sets out to take out a program of works that is directly linked back to your long-term plan and then sets those financial parameters in which you are going to achieve this. As we've talked about before in our forums and in the SPNF committee, there will be a range of engagement activities that we will use to get the message out and to have the conversation with the community about what will be delivered in Year 2. We are focusing on a digital engagement strategy, largely because of the world that we live in, but now as things are looking to free up a little bit, there will also be opportunities for some face-to-face engagement opportunities also. I've listed up there just a number of the various assets or activity that will be undertaken in the engagement period. So finalising or getting an approval from yourselves today, there will be an engagement period that will run from the 11th of April through to the 6th of May. Opening up on the 11th of April for an engagement period allows for any final changes or amendments that might need to be made to the document based on your going through it and providing those comments back to us. There then is a period in May right through till June where feedback that we receive on the delivery or questions that the community may have of us to be collated and to be worked through via yourselves. And then that culminates in a decision-making or recommendations that will go to the SPNF committee, and based on that decision-making and review of the feedback, the SPNF committee would make a recommendation through to council by the end of June to adopt the Year 2 budget, and from there can go into delivery. And that is me for engagement, if there are any questions.
Does that answer your question, that you had?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, look, I did read on page 16 earlier that the long-term plan delivery does not require public consultation. And I did see what had been discussed in SPNF. But today we are open to the public for the first time, and they don't know what we discussed in SPNF. They don't probably see. Justin Adams is sitting here for the first time after a long time. So it was good for him to know what the engagement process is as well. Thank you.
Just a clarification, we were very open at SPNF and spoke in volumes at SPNF. But it doesn't hurt repeating. Sometimes you've got to say things 6 times before they become reality. That's right. Councillor McPherson, question.
Thank you. I note the emphasis you gave, through you to Una, the emphasis you gave on sticking to the plan, the long-term plan, and stressing that to the public. There is a contrary view. That is that we need to emphasise a capacity and a willingness to adjust our plans in the light of the multiple and quite bizarre crises that are being faced by our people. So my question then comes down to the process of engagement, and will there be authentic hearings, an opportunity for people to come and speak to SPNF?
Through you, Madam Chair, this isn't actually a process, it's not a special consultative process, and it isn't a process that requires hearings. We have not undertaken hearings around annual plans for a number of years here. What we do offer is opportunities for the community to provide feedback in a number of different forums that works for them. Things like World Cafes, where the community come in and talk to you directly. All of that feedback is taken on board and is provided back to you collectively to make some decisions. That would be a similar process that would be being used in this process as well.
Could I follow up then, please? In addition to the cafes, which some people see as staged, is there, in addition to that, a possibility for interest groups?
Councillor McPherson, you mustn't give opinion. Just ask your question, please.
In addition to the cafes, will there be an opportunity for interest groups to be able to provide systematic written analyses and feedback on the Year 2 plan?
Yes, that's correct. That's exactly what feedback is. It's one method of feedback. We accept feedback in a number of varieties, and that's what our Let's Talk Kororo Mai platform is all about, and people can provide feedback into that platform in any type of form that they want, and they can email it into the council, and I believe the discussion document also provides an opportunity to phone in council, and also we collect feedback that comes through in Facebook posts. Even though we can't acknowledge directly the feedback post in terms of quantifying that into any analysis, we can actually use the feedback from Facebook posts and other social media to present to you also when you are considering all of the feedback that is received.
Thank you. One last question, if I may, through you, Chair. Is it possible for an interest group to be able to identify a component of the Year 2 plan that they find, for their purposes, requires clarification? Are they able then to come in and ask questions, receive those answers in good time so they can then formulate their response?
It would depend who that question is being directed at. I mean, council staff are there to support the engagement and put the document out. It is this council's work program and long-term plan. So we would need to understand what the question is to be able to ensure that the right people are there to answer those questions.
Thank you.
Councillor Tapsell.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. And perhaps this is a timely reminder that we are all from the one organisation. It does get a bit frustrating when we waste time fighting with each other when actually we set all of these targets and decide how to action them together. In saying that, I think we have heard from the executive and elected members that given the increasing pressures and the current challenging environment, there may need to be some things that we look at and reprioritise. So I appreciate the many ways that staff have formulated to get that feedback from the community. I do have a question in there. The question is, based on the significant changes since we first set the LTP, can the LTP be changed to reflect the feedback that we get? And I think that's really the core question that we're wanting to know here is, yes, we are firmly in a direction of wanting to progress and move Rotorua forward, but if the community does come back with some feedback on what their priorities will be over the next few years, then are we able to adjust that? I've heard from staff that that is a decision of council that's able to be done, but can we reassure our community that their feedback will be taken into consideration?
Yes, can I just remind the council as well that we are in year one of the LTP, and this LTP was created in the environment that we currently experience. So it was created at the heart of when we started COVID. I know we're experiencing COVID differently at this time than when we created it, but the strategies and the priorities of the LTP I don't think have changed, because our world, while we're under pressure with regards to inflation and a couple of other aspects, is making it more difficult. Our actual strategic priorities haven't changed. And saying that, if the community comes back and identifies that there's something fundamentally missing or would like to change anything, then yes, there are processes around how we can accommodate and adjust for that, 100%.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Thomas. Thomas, yep, that's exactly the same question and I asked as well about it. And although we did make the delivery in the COVID environment, I believe 3 years ago when COVID-19 first came, 2019 and 2020, when we started this discussion towards 2021, there was a lot of money available. Money was available cheap as well. Money has now moved up, interest rates are creeping up, and the word credit crunch is being flashed over and over again. 2 years ago, the word credit crunch wasn't around. Now it is really, and it is upon us.
Heard about financial pressures from the officer. Councillor Yates.
Through you, Madam Chair, I've heard a lot about feedback just in this last part of engagement. I would just like to question how will feedback be treated fairly, given that there could be communities of interest providing a one-sided view. So that would be my question. It may not be able to be answered now, but I do encourage all of us to be fair when that does come through.
But another remark. So we move now to, I need a mover and a seconder to the motion that Council approve the long-term plan 2021-2031, Year 2 delivery discussion document for the purposes of community engagement. Do I have a mover? Councillor Donaldson, seconded Councillor McPherson. Now we have discussion. Does anybody wish to discuss? Dave?
Thank you, Worship. I'll just make a couple of comments. I think it's shaping up, because we've got a draft here, as a very elegant document. Like, I guess, others, elected members have spotted a few typos and thought of a few enhancements, and I've forwarded those through to Una and sat down with one of the team to make some suggested edits, but I think it's shaping up as a really elegant discussion document. I love the use of the new tohu, and so I think it'll generate a really good discussion with our community, even though talking about risks and operational and organisational risks. We are putting our staff under pressure that we didn't have to in terms of going out for public engagement on this. I think it's the right thing to do, and it's the right document to support that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to state anything? Councillor Kaifong.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I think that it's been good to have this discussion this morning and highlight some of the risks that we are putting the organisation under, and I think it would be good for the community. I know we're calling it a discussion document rather than a full consultation, but I think it's good that we are actually giving the community the opportunity to actually have a look at the document. I think the document outlines a lot of the risk areas that we have talked about today, and so I think that I would just urge the community to please send that feedback in so that we as councillors do have a full picture of what the community would like to happen going forward, given that when we set the LTP, whilst there was COVID, we certainly didn't have the inflation, the supply side issues, and staff shortages and wage inflation and all those sorts of things that we never ever contemplated at the time. So we really do need to have feedback so that we can stop and listen and see whether or not our plan is fit for the future.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to stay? Well, I'll just say that it's good we've got this together in time. Timeframes are always really important, and in a very high-risk environment, as you point out, Councillor Kaifong, and putting extraordinary pressure if we deliver what we intend to deliver in year 2 of the long-term plan, putting the organisation under incredible pressure with incredible targets. But it is the time to hear back from the community, and I'm sure we will, and that is authentic engagement, and we will get that from our community, and they will share the same concerns that we all have. There are 3 priorities in here that I do feel are very pressing on us. The housing, the community safety, and this massive infrastructure spend that we must do in order to deliver our targets. But that is well covered in the document, and I like the dates, and I think the lengthy debate will be in June when we've received back the feedback from our community. But I do encourage all councillors to take an active part in different mechanisms of being able to get back our feedback for us. There appears to be no other discussion, so I'm going to put the motion to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Carried. Thank you, and well done getting that to us today. Recommendation 2, the Local Government Conference 2022. I need a mover and a seconder to receive the report. Local Government New Zealand Conference 2022 be received. Do I have a mover? Councillor Kaifong, seconded Councillor Maxwell. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary? Carried. Una, are you going to overview the report?
Through you, Madam Chair. I think everything is covered in the report. Just need to draw your attention to the fact that in line with the policy, we do need a decision from Council for councillors to attend the LGNZ conference. So far we have 1 nomination, and that is Councillor Wang, but we need to get a second nomination from yourselves today, and then we need a decision from Council for that to proceed.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Donaldson, question?
Not a question. I'd just like to signal that I'd like to move part 2 and nominate Councillor Yates as the second nominee. You wish.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Kumar?
I was going to request the same thing as well. I think Dave, and I think like to second that.
Oh, I think it's been seconded, but that's very nice. Kapo. Right, we now Are there any other points for clarification? Right. I just want to make a comment that this will be my last local government conference, and Deputy Dave Donaldson, and yet it's a very forward-facing conference theme, all about the future. So I'm glad we've got 2 nominations that will be looking at the future, in the future. The reason why the Mayor and the Deputy go are because we are the voting delegates at the AGM, and very important. And I do look forward to it, and I'm sure it'll be quite challenging to say goodbye to your local government colleagues too around the Motu. But it's great to have others with us, and we are waiting for the nomination from Te Tatou. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was more than pleased to second the nomination of Councillor Yates to form the delegation, along with our lead climate change person, Councillor Wang. I think that's it shows a good delegation that we're setting from Rotorua Lakes, with youth and experience going along to enjoy that, take part in the conference held in Palmerston North. I'm hoping also, I mean, there's plenty of time still now till it all happens, but I believe that Maruata always try and hold their own conference a day before to take advantage of the ones who are coming from around the 86 TLAs around the country the day before, and people do attend, and really the choices for the members themselves, and I hope they would, because there's going to be a big change with Te Maruata in the future. Now with the elections in October coming up, there will be 29 councils that will be voting in their Māori wards. That's going to make a huge sort of uplift in personnel and people participating, and it would be good if any of our members do attend that. So, yeah, more than happy to support the nomination and the recommendation that's there. Can I just say on page 20, just for the record there, it had in 2018, when I attended to go to there, that was at no cost to Rotorua Lakes Council at the time. I think it's important that that's noted. Kia ora.
Gosh, I thought I had a loud voice. I apologise to... It's the live stream, and I apologise to those out there listening. We have a mover and a seconder. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Bentley.
Yeah, I noticed at the top of page 21, Te Arawa have nominated Rawiri Waru.
Rawiri Waru, yeah, and Jude Tapane. Thank you. Thanks for pointing that out, Councillor Bentley. Yes, there were. This is going to be easier to get to. We'll be in a car going to Palmerston North, and ratepayers will be pleased about that. I'm going to put the motion to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary? Carried. Now we have a resolution to go into public excluded. I advise there are 3 items for consideration in public excluded: the confidential minutes from the council meeting on the 24th of February, recommendations from other committees, which are confidential items, and an emergency housing update. The reasons are a commercial sensitivity to enable commercial or industrial negotiations due to an obligation of confidence and to protect the public interest, and to protect all communications between a legal advisor and clients being disclosed without the permission of the client. Do I have a mover? Councillor Donaldson, seconded Councillor Kai Fong. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary? You want your vote recorded against? Yes, thank you. And the motion is carried. We'll stop.